Lack the what? Where are you looking? Instead of answering, Nadine did a strange gesture, laying one finger on her mouth before pointing deeper into the forest. Following her gaze, he at first saw nothing, but after a moment, something moved between the trees. Shortly after, a tall animal came into view, maybe 300 lines away from them. It walked on 6 legs, the body thin on each end with a wide midsection. Its broad head sat on an elongated throat, which he used to reach a low-hanging twig and gnaw off some leaves. Kurtis couldn't remember ever seeing this type of animal, but that didn't mean much. He had only been taught about those which were of economic importance to his people. Was that how had Nadine called it? Kurika? Is that the one you were looking for? Psht. Sorry, what? Pshto. Why are you hissing? Suddenly, the Kurika jerked its head around. Spotting the 4 of them, it then turned around and ran away. A moment of silence followed before Nadine took a deep breath. I wasn't hissing, Kurtis. I was telling you to be quiet. Hissing means be quiet? It's not hiss yes, that's what it means. How am I supposed to know that? The alien girl sighed. True, I guess you couldn't have known that. But you still could have been quiet by yourself. Why though? As he finished the question, Nadine's eyes opened a bit farther as she stared at him. She then quietly turned her head, looking at the point where the Kurika had stood. Then back at him and back into the forest again. That's why. Animals run away when you talk? Now he was even more confused. Sure, technically the Kurika had been right to run away. They were trying to kill it after all. But it didn't know that. It was just an animal. They run away when they get startled, and talking loudly is usually a good way to achieve that. The Orcs in the stables never did that. While he hadn't seen many animals in person, he was sure that was something he would have remembered. Yes, because domesticated animals know they are safe. Not to mention you can't exactly run away when you are locked in a stable. Oh, right. Makes sense. Well, no point in crying over spilled milk. Just remember to be quiet the next time we see it. We are not familiar with this forest, so I'd prefer not to do persistence hunting. She then turned to the 2 guards. Do you have anything we could mark the trees with? I'd like to avoid getting lost. The guards seemed to think for a moment before firing a few shots into the nearest tree trunk. What is the thing you just said? Kurtis wondered. The thing you want to avoid? Persistence hunting? That's basically the oldest hunting method in the book. The idea is simple. Intentionally make your prey run away and then chase it until it collapses. What? That's it? And what if you collapse first? Well, humans can do something called sweating. It allows us to regulate our temperature to increase our endurance. Because of that, we outlast most species. Still sounds dumb. Oh, does it now? Suddenly, Nadine turned towards him and closed the distance between them in an instant. Startled, Kurtis tried to step backward, but his back hit the wide trunk of a large tree. Then why don't you try to get away from me? She asked, looming over him. Well, not literally over him, he was still half a head taller than her, but the presence she radiated made it feel like that was reversed. But I must warn you, she continued. She was now leaning against the tree behind him, her hands left and right of him, pushing against the trunk. Running away from a human rarely ends well. The size difference was no longer just a feeling. Somehow her head was literally above his. Even if you outspeed me, I will always catch up. She angled her arms, getting her even closer. Even if you shake me off, you will always leave tracks I can trace. Her face was now directly in front of him, and he could feel the warmth of her body. A warmth that had previously been giving him a gentle, soothing feeling, but was now almost suffocating him. Even the shimmering gemstones that were her eyes somehow looked menacing now. And even if you hide, I will always find you, because... Her mouth was now directly next to his auditory hole, and as she opened it again, no voice came out. She didn't talk, just exhaled. Yet somehow he could hear her say words within that exhalation. I can hear you breathe. What was going on? He very well knew that she was just teasing him, again, but why was it so different this time? Why couldn't he move? Why was his heart beating so fast? Why was she suddenly taller than him? With a burst of laughter, the alien girl stepped away from him. and by doing so pulled him out of his stupor. "I'm sorry, that was a bit much." Only now did Kiritan realize that he was sitting at the tree's foot. At some point, his knees had seemingly given in without him noticing. Silvani straightened her posture as the servant placed the next plate on the table. It was the last dish planned for this day, a single set of convietas. These peculiar fruits often grew in pairs that would end up intertwined with each other, but not conjoined. The name literally translated embracing fruit, and they were a holy symbol of the goddess's love as she embraced her creation. That was at least what the Taistri believed. As far as Silvani was concerned, she was simply glad that their tradition only dictated that they had to share it on the first day of their meeting. Convietas were an absolute pain to store, and even if one did everything right, they would still spoil very quickly. Even freezing them didn't help. On the contrary, it made them inedible. Well, inedible for a Taistri at least. A Veneri couldn't eat them in either state. For that reason, what was now in the middle of the table wasn't an actual pair of ambuotas. Instead, it was just a single one. Its partner had been removed and replaced with an artificial one, molded from a hardened dough and made to look like the real thing. Refusing to share the fruit with the ambassador would have not only been considered a grave insult, but could in the worst case be interpreted as the princess mocking or even renouncing the peace between them. Thankfully, even the devout Taistri agreed that the symbolic meaning of the imitation was enough. Though that wasn't the only thing she needed to look out for. As the Taistri had a different culture and valued different things, sentences that seemed normal or harmless in a vacuum could end up being understood completely differently. For example, if her guest had been a noble of her own country, she would have by now asked whether or not everything was to their satisfaction or something like that. After all, it was expected from a host to make sure the guests were tended to. However, would she have given the ambassador the same question? It would have carried a very different meaning. In Taistri culture, a host didn't ask if anything was all right. He knew it was, or if it wasn't, wouldn't need to ask, because he already knew the problem and would fix it. As such, in asking the ambassador if everything was all right, Silvani would effectively say that she didn't trust her abilities as a host. Similar problems could arise with certain small talks. Asking, "Did you have a pleasant journey?" would either mean that she doubted the comfort, which since the ambassador had arrived on her own ship, would express that she questioned the Tistri's ability to build proper ships, or the security, which since the Vanoro were the ones safeguarding that route, would express that she questioned the abilities of her own soldiers. All of this was a result of a central belief. If someone's steps were guided by the goddess, they had the confidence not to question themselves. If they weren't, they shouldn't make decisions in the first place. As such, someone showing doubt was considered to walk the wrong path. Of course, Silvani had no obligation to put up with this. It was the Tistri who had offered to enter negotiations for a new treaty, and she would have had any right to refuse. In fact, many had advised her to do exactly that. They said the chances for a treaty that was worth the effort were too low, that they didn't have enough to gain. And they were right. But Silvani hadn't told them, or anyone really, the true reason why she had agreed to the negotiations. The reason was the very thing that came to everyone's mind first when they thought of the Taistri. Titanium. The metal was used in many things, and the Taistri sat on an entire planet full of it. They had been selling it to basically everyone in the Alliance, and the Vaneri couldn't have created their great fleet so easily without it. But over the course of 2 generations, things had suddenly changed. The Taistri had become more and more reluctant to sell their ore, slowly letting their trade agreements run out without renewing them. It hadn't been obvious from the get-go. Communication past the hyperlanes was difficult, so most races thought another one had struck a better deal. And when it finally came out, they blocked all questions, simply stating that it was their decision what happened with their resources. While that was certainly true, it was also very suspicious. The fact that they completely refused to let any outsider visit them didn't help. Various rumors followed, many voices accusing them of secretly building up an army or other ulterior motives. The princess herself wasn't sure what to make of this. Why the secrecy? Threats like Kirisha were a valid reason to bolster up one's forces. There was no reason to hide it. However, they were clearly hiding something. If not, why cut off the main source of their wealth? And why then keep trying to get treaties that aren't even close to being as beneficial as the old ones for either side? That was what Silvani was after. The ideal scenario would be to get the ambassador in a situation where she had to admit the truth. Or to be precise, the ideal situation would be to get a new deal for metal shipments on top of that. But even if that couldn't be done, she needed to at least know whether or not the Tystre's secrecy hid something that could be a threat to her people. That information was definitely worth the stress and trouble she had gone through for this meeting. "May the goddess's love embrace us," Ambassador Kikla started the traditional phrase, and picked up the real half of the Kenvitas pair, pointing the fake one at the princess. "And may her light shine upon us, so we may meet in harmony and without discord," Silvani finished, before both of them simultaneously took a bite.